Brilliant students, it's me again, Member B, and today we'll discuss the second part of our lesson on judging the relevance and worth of ideas, soundness of others' reasoning, and effectiveness of the presentation. Remember that we have five macro skills, namely speaking, listening, viewing, reading, and writing. Listening, as we have discussed before, is a very important skill because it allows us to give feedback and response. Effective listening requires an ability to evaluate whether we should believe the point being raised or not. So it involves assessing the weight of the evidence used to support it. Now, speaking of listening, we are going to start our lesson today by listening to these statements. Statement A. It is going to rain because it is cloudy. The wind is picking up and the air smells damp. Statement B. All Filipinos are generous and kind like Senator Manny Pacquiao. My question is, between these two statements, which do you agree with? Is it statement A or statement B? What made you agree with the statement? Is it because the statement provided you with reasons or evidences to support its claim? If that is your answer, then you are on the right track. Critical thinking means being able to spot factual information, but at the same time, it also means being able to make good arguments. Arguments are claims backed by reasons that are supported by evidence. So, when we say evidence, it is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or a proposition is true or valid. Evidence is the information that helps us in the formation of a conclusion or judgment. So whether you know it or not, you provide evidence in most of your conversations. They're all the things you say to try and support your claim. They're everything that you say when you're trying to prove your point or when you're trying to convince someone. For example, when you leave the cinema and then turn to your friend and say, "That movie was awesome. Did you see those fight scenes? Unreal." Okay? When you say that, you have just made a claim and back it up. Okay? So here are the steps in analyzing and evaluating the validity of evidence. So we just have to remember three steps: argumentation, specificity, and relevance. So when we say argumentation, this is the point where we identify the claim that the author is trying to prove. What is he trying to tell us? Second, specificity. This is where we identify the specific facts, data, statistics, or examples that support the point. Did the author use any specific data, any specific numbers or examples that will support his claim? And relevance. Of course, this is the last stage wherein we have to explain how the pieces of evidence are related to the claim. Are the data, the facts that the author mentioned, relevant or connected to his claim or point? Now, let's take a look at this example. We should set a limit to our game time. In my experience, spending so much on computer games prevents me from submitting my modules on time, which resulted to failing grades. Now, what is the point or claim? The point or claim in this sample is we should set a limit in playing computer games. So in this case, the author believes that what should be done is to set a limit in playing computer games. So claims are potentially arguable, meaning some people can disagree and offer support for different opinions. So when we make a claim, we also give reasons, right? And of course, you have to tell us why you have said it. So it answers the questions, why do you say that? Or what reason can you give me to believe that? Okay? Evidence, as what we have discussed earlier, serves as support for the reasons you give and helps you compel audiences to accept your claim. So in this case, okay, the evidence that was cited is, in my experience, spending so much on computer games prevents me from submitting my modules on time, which resulted to failing grades. So this is a type of anecdotal evidence. Okay, so this is an evidence that shows specific instances or examples based on observation or experience. So to be effective, specific instances like this example need to be a representative of the broader trend or idea that you are supporting. So in this example, okay, the experiences of the author has been used to support his claim that we should limit our game time because it leads to failing grades. Aside from that, we can also use statistics. In public speeches, statistics have the advantage of seeming objective, authoritative, and factual. Okay, but just like what we have discussed in our previous lessons, it's always important that we know our sources and we determine or cite them. Now, we also use eyewitnesses or first-hand testimonies. So these are the reports from people who directly experience some phenomenon. So if a speaker is arguing about toxic waste dumps, a quotation from someone living next to a dump would fall into this category. First-hand testimony can help give the audience a sense of being there. When using testimony in arguments, you should always make sure that the authority you're appealing to is in fact qualified to speak on the topic being discussed. Now, relation of the evidence to the point or claim. The evidence reflects the possible outcome of excessive online gaming based on the speaker's experiences. So what the author is trying to say is that if we're not going to set a limit in our game time, then possibly, okay, one of the consequences is that we're going to have failing marks, right? So at this point, we're going to discuss the different types of evidences that we could use or incorporate in our arguments. So the first one is the statistical evidence. It is known as the strongest type of evidence. It comes in the form of number, percentage, or survey type data. Statistical evidence is the kind of data people tend to look for first when trying to prove a point. That's not surprising when you consider how prevalent it is in today's society. Remember those McDonald's signs that said over 1 billion served? How about those toothpaste commercials that say 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this? So every time you use numbers to support the main point, you're relying on statistical evidence to carry your argument. So just like in the examples that we have here, 75% of women, 8 out of 10, 16 members. So once you spot a number, okay, and you use numbers or data to support your argument, then you're using statistical evidence. The second type of data is what we call testimonial evidence. Use of celebrities is the core of this second type of evidence. However, experts and authorities can also be used to collect testimonial evidence. So testimonial evidence is another type of evidence that is commonly turned to by people trying to prove a point. So commercials that use spokespersons, okay, celebrities, influencers to testify about the quality of a company's product, or lawyers who rely on eyewitness accounts to win a case. And in your case, students who quote an authority in your essays, you are all using testimonial evidence. So the example that we have here is Heart Evangelista, a well-known actress and fashion buff, recommends that Olay lotion is good on our skin. So this is an example of testimonial evidence using the celebrity Heart Evangelista to tell us how effective a certain product is. Next, the third type of data is what we call the anecdotal evidence. It is often dismissed as untrustworthy and meaningless. Why do you think so? When the speaker does storytelling, anecdotal evidence is utilized. So it is often dismissed as untrustworthy and meaningless, and that is why it is underutilized among the different types of evidences that we have. So anecdotal evidence is evidence that is based on the person's observations of the world. And since we may have different perspectives, we have different experiences, and possibly different interpretation of things, anecdotal evidence is considered untrustworthy. Although this can be useful for disproving generalizations because all you need to do is one example that will contradict a certain claim. So you can use this type of evidence to support claims if you are going to use it in conjunction with other types of evidence. Personal observations or anecdotal evidence can serve as wonderful examples to introduce a topic and build it up. Just make sure you include statistical evidence so that the reader of your paper doesn't question whether your examples are just isolated incidents. So still, even though some people recognizes anecdotal evidence as untrustworthy and meaningless, you can still use it and make sure that you use it in combination with other types of evidence. The last one is what we call the analogical evidence. It is regarded as the weakest evidence. When information about something is scarce and little is known, analogical evidence is often used in a formal argument to increase credibility of the proof. Analogies are mainly used when dealing with a topic that is under research, meaning we don't know much about the topic. So it's hard for us to get any data or statistics or authorities on the matter to quote. So you have to get your evidence from somewhere. And analogical evidence steps in to save the day. So take the following example. Let's say you work in a company that is considering turning some land into a theme park. On that land, there happens to be a river that your bosses think would make a great whitewater rafting ride. They called on you to assess whether or not that ride would be a good idea. Since the land in question is, as of date, undeveloped, you have no casualty reports or statistics to refer to. In this case, you can look to other rivers with the same general shape to them, altitude, or other traits, and see if any whitewater rafting casualties have occurred on those rivers. Although the rivers are different, the similarities between them should be strong enough to give credibility to your research. So realtors use the same type of analogical evidence when determining the value of a home. So our example here is, if we are going to ban firearms, we should also ban cars because they cause many more deaths than firearms do. So in this case, the author's claim is that we should ban cars. But instead of providing us statistics or any other form of data to support this claim, what he did is he made an analogy between the banning of cars and the banning of firearms. Right? So those are the 4 types of evidence. Now this time, let's explore all the learning tasks that you're going to accomplish for this week's lesson. Learning task 1. Read an excerpt from Angelina Jolie's address to the UN Peacekeeping Ministerial, then answer the questions that follows. In fact, our support should be strongest where rights are threatened the most. We seem incapable of upholding minimum standards for humanity in the many parts of the world. That this comes at a time when humankind is richer and more technologically advanced than ever before is all more painful. 18 years ago, when I first began working at United Nations Refugee Agency, there were just 20 million displaced people worldwide, and the numbers were failing. Today, there are over 65 million displaced people, and the numbers are rising. More countries are experiencing some form of violent conflicts today than any time 30 years ago. UN peacekeepers now comprise the second largest group of forces deployed overseas, and are often required to serve when there is little or no peace to be kept. Against this backdrop, it is easy to dismiss our institutions as flawed or ineffective. Now, listening to the excerpt of Angelina Jolie's speech, first, let us identify the point or the claim raised in the excerpt. Okay? It's like identifying the main idea or the thesis statement. What is the claim being raised by the speaker? The claim is to strengthen UN peacekeeping efforts in areas where human rights are threatened the most. So if you can remember, in our lesson in main ideas, usually we find main ideas at the beginning of the paragraph or at the beginning of the selection. Now, what types of evidence are used? Now, in this example, she have used statistical evidence and anecdotal evidence. Are the pieces of evidence enough to support the point or claim? Why or why not? So before we answer it, first let us spot or identify which is the statistical evidence and which is the anecdotal evidence. So the anecdotal evidence here is 18 years ago when I first began working at United Nations Refugee Agency. So here she was trying to tell us her experience, okay, when she started working at that particular agency. And statistical evidence, the example here is today there are over 65 million displaced people and the numbers are rising. So in this example, we've used 65 million people, the number, okay? And actually there are other parts of the paragraph that also use statistical evidence. Now, are these evidences enough? Yes or no? Now you have to think about it, and you have to think about why these evidences are enough to support her claim. Next, read the selection carefully and answer the questions that follow. Teenage mothers face critical health risks, including inadequate nutrition during pregnancy due to poor eating habits, dangers associated with their reproductive organs not ready for birth, and maternal death due to a higher risk of eclampsia. Alarmingly, while maternal deaths are decreasing in the Philippines, teenage maternal deaths are increasing. 10% of pregnant teenagers died last year, according to the Philippine Statistics Agency. Data from World Health Organization also show a high and increasing incidence of fetal death in Filipino mothers under 20. Now, let's answer the following questions. Number 1, what is the excerpt all about? A. Maternal deaths are decreasing. B. The number of teenage pregnancies increases every year. C. Teenage mothers face critical health risks. Or letter D. 10% of pregnant teenagers die due to complications. So what is the main idea of the paragraph we have read? That's right, it's letter C. Teenage mothers face critical health risks. Now, in Learning Task 2, you're going to analyze the transcribed speech of Jack Simons entitled Social Media Corrupts Human Interaction. Now, this is just an excerpt, so you can watch the entire video. I'm just going to give you the link. Then accomplish the diagram that you can see here on the presentation. So what you need to do after reading the excerpt is to complete the diagram. So you have to identify the main point or claim of the author and identify at least 2 types of evidences that he used. So for example, the main point of this speech is about social media and how it negatively affects us at individual level. So one of the evidences that he used is this line. It was found that on average, participants were spending 61 minutes per day on social media and visiting social media website over 30 minutes per week. And this is a type of statistical evidence. Right? Next is, you have to explain in a short paragraph how the evidences from the speech of Jack Simons help strengthen the claim. Okay? Did he use enough evidences to support his claim, or did he use the right type of evidences to support his claim? Right? That's for Learning Task 2. Next, Learning Task 3. In Learning Task 3, you're going to read the speech of the former President Barack Obama carefully, then analyze the evidence using the given table. So you just have to read the speech, the entire speech, and complete the given table. So you have to identify the point or the claim of the author or the speaker, the evidences that he used, and of course, identify what type of evidences those are. Now, always keep in mind the 4 kinds of evidences whenever you listen to information so that you can give sound feedback and response when being asked. So again, what are the different types of evidences? We have statistical evidence. It is the strongest type of evidence. So whenever you see numbers, percentages, survey data, that's statistical evidence. Number 2, testimonial evidence. These are claims made by witnesses. So whenever a certain speech or article use claims coming from celebrities, experts, and authorities, that's an example of testimonial evidence. Anecdotal evidence is often dismissed as untrustworthy and meaningless because this is based on the person's experience and observation. So a good example of this one is storytelling. And lastly, analogical evidence. So this is considered as the weakest evidence. So conclusions based on comparisons. Because we don't have much data, that's why we resort to using analogical evidence. All right? Now for the last part, let's try to accomplish the assessment. So choose the letter that corresponds to the type of evidence given. Write your answer on the space provided before each number. So let's just try to do the first one. Studies show that hand washing practices could cut the rate of respiratory infections by more than 20%. So is this statistical evidence, testimonial evidence, anecdotal evidence, or analogical evidence? What do you think? That's right. The correct answer is statistical evidence. Again, once you see numbers or once you use numbers in your arguments, then that's statistical evidence. And of course, the last part is for us to accomplish this reflection. So I hope this video had helped you in understanding your module or in understanding what the lesson is about. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully, I'll see you next time. Bye.